Eagles Entertainment.
Eagle Eye in the Sky is fueled by Gatorade, the official sports drink of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Anything that move, I don't care who it is. Let's go. Give me everything you got. Play fast, play hard. Let's beat these boys tonight in their house. It's party time. It's party time. There we go. Touchdown!
You're listening to the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Now here's your host, Fran Duffy.
That's right of the week, and we're talking Cowboys as the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, continues. I'm Fran Duffy, and as always, I think we've got a great show for you here on episode number 282. At the top of this week's show, we've got Chalk Talk, where I chat with En Fennell about the Eagles' Week 8 battle against the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday Night Football. Ben is a big part of the production of Eagles game plan, and with that in mind, we will talk about what went into making this week's show, producing it, getting all the segments ready for the talent for Greg Cosell, for Mike Quick, for Ike Reese, the keys to victory as well we will hit on here for the Eagles, and some big matchups and stats to keep in mind for this matchup. We'll do all of that at the top of the show in Chalk Talk. After that, Ben and I will go through our scouting report segment, and this week I wanted to focus on really one of the most dynamic playmakers, not just on this team, but in the entire NFL through what he's done so far this season. That is their 2020 first-round pick in this past draft, CeeDee Lamb, the wide receiver from Oklahoma. He's coming off a bit of a rough game this past week against Washington, but what does he bring to the table, and how can he impact this game on Sunday? We will cover that in Scouting Report. That show doesn't end there, though, because at the end of this week's show, I also caught up with Eagles safety Will Parks to talk about his background, his athletic background growing up here in Philadelphia, making that trek out west to play at Arizona, and then eventually with the Denver Broncos before returning home this year to play in Philadelphia. Before we get into all of that, though, just a couple of quick reminders here. First off, if you haven't yet, the best way to throw us your support is to go on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, leave us a rating, leave us a comment. I answer questions every single show right here. So if you leave a question, we will answer it right here on the show. Also, I mentioned Eagles game plan. Before we get into my chat with Ben, I wanted to give you a little bit of a tease to a segment I did this week with Eagles head coach Doug Pederson. We broke down a few of the big plays from last week's win over the New York Giants. We talked about the game-winning touchdown from Carson Wentz to Boston Scott. Here's a bite from a segment we call Tape Study, presented by Chickies and Pete's. We'll look at the game-winning touchdown, Carson Wentz to Boston Scott. Take us through this play, because there's a lot of layers to it. Excited to get your thoughts on how this play came to be.
There is a lot of layers, and obviously this is a great play to start with because it's the game winner. This play, obviously, we put Richard Rodgers. You can see the tight end there on the left. He's in an off position, and we used him in protection on this particular play. Gives us another layer of protection for the quarterback. And then we're taking 13, Travis Fulgham, down here at the bottom of the screen, and he's running what we call an angle route. So he's going to push inside and then run an angle to the back corner of the end zone. G. Ward in the slot, Greg Ward in the slot, is running a deep cross. So he's kind of working back across the field as well. And then Boston Scott is what we call a rail route, and he's just going one-on-one with his man and just trying to circle the defense. And it's an opportunity with protection to take a shot down the field. If it's not there, you got the one-on-one matchup with Boston Scott, and Carson here stood tall in the pocket. We had a really good pocket right here. He moved a little bit and made a NFL throw with a defender all over Boston Scott to make this over-the-shoulder grab. We're just a great play by two guys. Obviously, couldn't be happier for Boston to make this catch and win the game for us.
So take us through from a coverage standpoint, Coach. New York, they're running a little bit of a bracket here, it seems, where they're going to kind of double team these two guys, the immediate threats into the secondary. Does that allow for Boston to just kind of maintain that one-on-one, even though he's still working vertically?
Yeah, bracket coverage is just that. It kind of plays out as a quarters look or a man type of a look for the quarterback, where they can really double, as you see there, you can double the number one receiver to the weak side, and then in this case, the slot receiver there at G. Ward. And quite frankly, the one-on-one matchup is always going to be the halfback on a linebacker and or a safety with this particular coverage. And, I'd like to say that it was all credit on me by a great play call, but I think more than anything, it was a great play by Carson and Boston Scott.
So, Coach, let's go now back to from the last play offensively to the first play. And I'm interested to look at this end around for Deshaun Jackson on the opening play of the game. We actually broke this same play down against this same defense a few weeks ago here on the show with San Francisco, Brandon Ayuk on a touchdown. Excited for you to break this play down for us here to Deshaun Jackson.
Well, first of all, we were excited to get Deshaun Jackson back in the lineup for this game, so we wanted to get him some touches early and get him involved, and this is a great way to get a guy like him involved, and this is just a standard end around where we're going to fake a weak side sort of stutter. We're going to pull the guard. We're going to fake the running back coming to the two-man, what we call the two-man surface, or to the left here, and then Deshaun is just pushing and running his around, and you look at the top of the screen, Greg Ward, he's the point player in the bunch set. His job is to pin that defensive end, that outside linebacker position right there on the line of scrimmage. Just keep him there. And then Richard Rodgers is selling as if he were going to get in behind the guard, Herbig, and pull up for the linebacker. You typically on the stutter, but then he wheels around, and he and Travis Fulgham now have the two outside defenders right there. Carson shows ball. Here comes Deshaun. It's really good timing by those two. And then now here comes Richard Rodgers. Here comes Jason Kelsey. We got the cavalry out in front. And it's a great way to start the game, 12-yard gain, and to get Deshaun involved early.
I know you guys are always looking around the league at plays that are working, plays that are trending. Was this one of those ones? Because it feels like I've seen this play on film all around the NFL all season long.
Yeah, teams have used it against us, and it's a play that we do have in our arsenal. It's been in our game plan, been in our training camp playbook a lot, and so it was a good time to pull it out and use it, especially when you got a guy like Deshaun back in the lineup.
It's always good catching up with Coach Pederson, and we broke down 3 total plays from that game. So make sure you go check that out this week on Eagles Game Plan. That'll be up on PhiladelphiaEagles.com and the Eagles mobile app on Friday. If you're local to Philadelphia, you can also check out Sunday morning, 10 a.m., NBC 10 Philadelphia. That's when Eagles Game Plan rolls on TV. So that being said, we've talked about Eagles Game Plan. Let's talk about it now with the guy who is just so critical to the production of that show on a weekly basis. That is En Fennell. Let's dive into our chat now in Chalk Talk.
Let's get down to business. It's time for Chalk Talk.
Well, back again for another segment of Chalk Talk here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. My friend En Fennell. Ben, welcome back, man.
Yeah, it's good to be back.
Let's talk through this matchup, man, because it's obviously been a little bit of an extended break, obviously with the Eagles playing on Thursday Night Football as we get ready for this Eagles-Cowboys matchup. And look, it's Eagles-Cowboys, so there's always a lot of buzz, a lot of juice in the city getting ready for this game. The fact of the matter is Dallas isn't playing particularly well, and so it was a little bit difficult this week to kind of put together an episode of Eagles Game Plan, just because, too, the other thing is the injuries on both sides, with both squads being banged up and questions in the air about who's going to play and where were they going to play. And this is on both sides, not just the Eagles, but Cowboys as well. It was tough to kind of really kind of put concrete thought into getting these segments ready for early in the week, getting ready for a show that debuts late in the week. But let's just talk through what we've kind of settled in on. With the Cowboys defense, we wanted to talk about defending Carson Wentz with his second reaction ability with those scramble drill situations. We've seen Carson be so effective over the last few weeks in those kinds of scenarios where he's able to break the pocket and make something happen with either his arm or his legs, namely that 30-yard reception from Carson to Richard Rodgers late in the game last week that helped set up the game-winning touchdown. That was kind of an area we said, all right, this could be kind of interesting from Dallas' standpoint. And then with the Cowboys offense, just kind of getting into their identity, which is that, quick game, ball out, Mike McCarthy. I remember when Mike McCarthy first got hired, we brought you on right here to the show to talk about, his identity as a coach and what he was going to bring. And that really has kind of manifested itself in terms of a lot of quick game, focus on yards after catch, get the ball in the playmakers' hands very, very fast with simple, quick game, West Coast offense staples. And that's really what their identity has been.
Yeah, absolutely. Not the most competitive or sexy matchup heading into Week 8 in the NFL at this point, but it's a great NFC East rivalry. But each team are kind of shells of themselves, and we're trying to sit here, watching the film and figure out what to make of these rosters and the injuries on both sides of the ball. And neither team is obviously playing well, but the division collectively isn't playing well, which means it's up for grabs and it's competitive. So, but like we always say, you kind of throw out the records when these types of rival games kind of come down the pipe in the schedule. And it's really fun to anytime you have Eagles-Cowboys week.
So let's talk through this Cowboys offense from a philosophical standpoint, right? Because I think coming in, a lot of people, everybody was excited about this Dallas offense and what they were going to look like, all the weapons. And the weapons have looked good, right? I mean, whenever Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, when those guys get the football, they look explosive. They look dynamic. They can make plays. I know that you had noted they're one of the best yards after catch teams in all of football. and that was really that was the crux of what they were built on, right? And as I mentioned earlier, it's basic. You look at double slant or slant flat, stick, shallow crosses, all the basic West Coast offense staple route concepts. And that was it. I mean, the ball was coming out of Dak's hands fast. Let's get these guys the ball, especially when it came to Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. Let's get them the ball fast and let them do most of the work.
Yeah, the offense was really generating a lot of yards and points early in the season. They got behind early in some games and really had to abandon the already abandoned run game. And that's why Dak was on pace for 5,000 yards or whatever, crazy passing total. But they're 2-5 and lucky to be 2-5, squeezing that one out against the Atlanta Falcons in week 2 at the crazy onside kick late in the game there. But this is a team that just, defensively has not done them any favors, absolutely getting gashed week in and week out, putting the offense in bad spots. And then even early on, just turning the ball over way too much, even with Dak Prescott, then into Andy Dalton, and now into the Ben DiNucci era of the Dallas Cowboys. You just can't sustain offense and win games, on a week-to-week basis if you're going to turn the ball over and get absolutely run through on the defensive side of the ball. But when they were healthy and they had CD and Amari and Dak Prescott and Zeke and a semblance of their offensive line, I know Tyron Smith was kind of in and out and Zach Martin was in and out, trying to figure out the next era of the center position as well. Now that Travis Frederick is no longer there. So just a lot of moving parts with the Eagles, the Cowboys, and it's been a really turbulent 8 weeks that really feel like almost a 4-month, type of time frame.
Yeah, I think when you look at them, you look at the offensive side and it's like, all right, well, we talked about what their identity is in the pass game. And then you look at it from a personnel standpoint. Dak Prescott, when he was in there, was playing at a very high level. Again, ball out fast. He was able to create, and they were able to create some chunk plays down the field as well. They've been one of the most explosive pass games in the league. But I think when you look, a lot of their downfield shots for the most part have gone to the wide receiver, Michael Gallup. He's their X receiver. They'll line him up to the boundary, and you see a lot of vertical routes there. That he's kind of been their downfield shot weapon. But outside of that, as I mentioned, they're just looking to carve people up with those basic pass game concepts. So when Dak gets hurt, I'm like, okay, well, let's see what this looks like with Andy Dalton. And we watched the Arizona game together. We watched the Giants game or the Washington game together. And you got to kind of see, all right, this is what the offense is going to look like with him at the helm. A lot of shotgun. Ton of empty. And I think a lot of that goes to Dalton, but I think a lot of that speaks to the offensive line as well and some of the issues that they've had just in pass protection. I mean, you mentioned they come into the year. The Dallas O-line has obviously gotten a lot of pub over the course of the last 5-6 years, but Tyron Smith has been just really, he's been really struggling with injuries. When healthy, he's been a good player, and at times he was an elite top shelf player. I'm not sure that he's quite there at this point in his career, and the injuries have just really prevented him from being on the field and being reliable from that standpoint. Connor Williams has been very up and down, probably more down than up over the tenure of his career so far. And he's in his 3rd season now, a former 2nd-round pick from the University of Texas. You look at center, you mentioned they move on from Travis Frederick. They were hoping that Joe Looney was going to be the starter. He's just now getting back to practice. He's been on IR, so they've had to rely on the rookie center, Tyler Biadasz from Wisconsin. He was a 4th-round pick, not a special talent, more of a grinder type of player there in the trenches, and he's been okay. But again, you're dealing with a rookie center. Zach Martin's been banged up. He missed last week with a concussion. He missed some time earlier this season as well. There's been thought, is he going to be a right guard? Is he going to be a right tackle? Is he going to be somewhere else when he comes back into the lineup? Because Terrence Steele, he's been the undrafted free agent right tackle. La'el Collins has been out all season long, and he's officially done for the season. So Terrence Steele, who's struggled, he's been what you would expect from an undrafted rookie right tackle. So I think when you look at this offensive line, they have really given them a lot of issues. And I think now when you look at those empty sets with what they've done the last 2 weeks, I really don't think that will change, whether that's Andy Dalton or Ben DiNucci under center for this team. Give us the pros and cons of an empty set and what that does for the offense and some of the pitfalls of that as well.
Well, I think the Cowboys are going to that just to protect the quarterback, protect the offensive line, get the ball out of his hands, try to get some timing and rhythm with the pass game. It's great to identify coverage and pressure information pre-snap, but the downside of it, you have minimal protection. That means you have minimal time. So typically the ball is coming out. You're not pushing the ball down the field. You're not generating a lot of explosive plays. It's really a vanilla type of scheme on offense in order to get a vanilla scheme on defense. But the downside is you really can't attack down the field with the way the protection is structured. But I think the Dallas Cowboys offense is really interesting philosophically, because I think they're at a kind of a philosophical crossroads in bringing in Mike McCarthy, who's for lack of better words, a pass game type of style of coach that puts a lot of pressure on the quarterback position to execute the scheme. Well, this is a team that just paid Zeke Elliott, and you paid a lot of those guys on the offensive line. And for a long time, the strength of the team was to run the football. And Mike McCarthy has gone right back to his, trend and style of the Green Bay Packers, where right now they're running the ball overall 31st. On 1st and 10, they're 29th. So all the analytics guys that don't want to run the ball, they're going to like that. But this really isn't the identity and the profile of the team, and they want it to be a run-first type of offense. But I know they paid Amari Cooper, and they're working on a franchise deal right now, franchise tag deal at Dak Prescott, and trying to work out something long-term. But I just don't know if I agree with the philosophical approach of getting a coach that relies on the pass game, when you seem to be an offense built for the run, and you're abandoning the run more and more on a week-to-week basis as your quarterback's not there, your O-line's not there. I just don't know what they want this identity of the team to be moving forward. I think it's a much bigger picture and conversation than people are having.
And I think it's interesting too, man. Not only that, but when you look at their running backs carries in terms of like who they're giving the ball to when they do run, Zeke Elliott has gotten less than 60% of the touches so far out of the backfield as a runner. I mean, he's getting 58.7% of the carries. Tony Pollard has just north of 16% of the carries.
Fran, Zeke is on a trajectory right now to be in the same boat as Todd Gurley, paid and out. David Johnson, paid and out. Le'Veon Bell sat out to get paid, got paid and out. I really think Zeke Elliott is going to be the next in this conversation of elite running back, paid, and eventually out for whatever reasons, whether it's scheme, injuries, off the field, locker room stuff. I just don't understand paying him and not using him and making him the fixture of this offense, even with the quarterback issues.
Right.
Dak goes down. You have this top flight running back you paid and you want to be a future and a pillar of the offense. Run this dude into the ground. Give him the ball. Let him carry the offense and be the guy. And I know they've tried to, and he really hasn't lived up to, the standard I think we all see for Zeke Elliott. But it's a collective thing with the injuries. Now you're dealing with stacked boxes, and just a really tough approach right down there in Dallas.
And I think, too, the ball security has certainly been an issue this year, and that's not going to help, right? If Mike McCarthy, if he trends naturally to want to throw the football, and then it's like, look, we have to run the football with Zeke, and then he puts the ball on the ground, like that's not going to help Mike McCarthy, right?
Exactly.
I mean,
now they're in a tough situation.
Yeah, exactly. And so going back just from a personnel standpoint, just looking at Andy Dalton, okay, and to me, the way that I look at Andy Dalton at this point in his career, just to give Eagles fans kind of a picture in their mind, I would say it's very similar to like Sam Bradford, right? And talking with Joe Goodberry, who does a great job covering the Bengals, has for a long time, does a lot of writing for The Athletic. You look at Andy Dalton, and talking with Joe, I said, where is Andy at this point in his career? Because he's watched every single snap leading into this season. He said, look, he's going to run the play the way it's designed, and he'll take whatever the defense gives him. If you give him one-on-one over the top, he's going to take it. If you give him a 5-yard check down on 3rd and 8, he'll take that too. He's not the guy that's going to consistently just go and make a play when you need it. His accuracy is solid. It gets worse on more difficult throws when he's got to drive the ball, down the field. He can be confused by things pre-snap, doesn't always locate the safeties, and he'll drop his eyes if pressure starts to compile. I think when you look at him, I think there's a lot of similarities to Sam Bradford when he was a starter here in Philadelphia. You look, 2014, 2015, leading into the 2016 season. I think that's kind of where Dalton is, which, by the way, that meshes okay with Mike McCarthy. I think the problem is that just right now, the offensive line is just not been able to hold up enough for him that he's going to be able to drop back and be able to make plays comfortably. Because I talked about the pressure how that can impact him negatively. That's a problem for Andy Dalton, right? So I think when you look at this offensive line, they're really kind of hamstringing what they can do because they can't protect Dalton, who needs that protection. And they're not really getting a ton of push up front in the run game to open things up for Zeke Elliott. Then you look at how that meshes with the scheme. The scheme is simplistic, purposely simplistic, right, to get the ball to their best playmakers. And those guys are dangerous. As we mentioned, with CeeDee Lamb and Cooper and Gallup. Noah Brown's a nice player. Cedric Wilson's a really nice fourth receiver. Dalton Schultz has done nice things as a tight end. We haven't talked about the running back Tony Pollard out of the backfield as well and his versatility, what they do with him in the pass game and in the perimeter run game. So the weapons are there. They're the core stuff that leans into those weapons is just the shaky part of it right now for them.
I don't think we're breaking any news by saying Andy Dalton's kind of a limited quarterback. You could win games with him, as he proved in Cincinnati for 5 years. I think what you're describing also, he's not that much different than Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
And I think if Andy Dalton was down there in Washington in that offense and then, eventually, got paid and went to Minnesota, Kirk Cousins is the same guy, a limited quarterback, good initial read type of player. But when things break down, and that was always my knock on Sam Bradford in St. Louis, great quarterback when things are perfect. But when something breaks down, he needs to get off his read. He needs to move in the pocket. And listen, Fran, it's the NFL. Things break down a lot.
Yep.
And you have to be able to have solutions to problems, within the course of a play. And I think there are certain quarterbacks in the league, whether it's Andy Dalton or the highly paid, more, big name quarterback like a Kirk Cousins that are limited when things break down. And I think that gets himself into trouble.
So let's go to the defensive side now. And you talked about, we talked about earlier, how it was tough to kind of pinpoint exactly what we wanted to talk about because this defense, they're historically bad right now when you look at the numbers, right, with what they're doing. And I mentioned the stat that you had brought up earlier this week with Greg Cosell about, the run game and how they, where they ranked in terms of yards before contact and where they ranked in yards after contact. And then how that was just a really easy way to kind of look at the issues they were having on the ground. And now since that point, since that recording, they've traded Everson Griffin. They've said that they're going to release if they can't trade. This is we're recording this Wednesday midday around 12:30 p.m. They have not made any moves yet, but they've talked about the reports are that they're going to release Dontari Poe, who's been a starter for them at nose tackle, and then also Darryl Worley, the veteran corner. So I think they're trying to shake things up on that side of the ball, right? And get some new guys in. We'll see what that means. What does that mean that Bradley Anai gets more snaps at defensive end? They're obviously hoping that Chidobe Awuzie comes back off IR and kind of take some of those snaps away from Worley. At defensive tackle, will we see more Neville Gallimore? What does all that mean, I guess, is the big thing. But I think ultimately this is a defense that they're just trying to find something to be able to hang their hat on, to be able to do what they're not doing anything well at this point in the year.
Yeah, I just really brought up those run stats, not to throw, more dirt on a team all the time. I was just more impressed that it's tough to give up the most yards before contact and then the second most after contact. Typically, if you're a bad run defense, you somehow fit into one of those. But they're just obviously getting gash before the tackle point, at the tackle point, whatever it is. But as we like to say, Fran, in our Seinfeldisms, the Cowboys are starting to name names. And as we watched the tape this past week, we're kind of looking at each other like, what is this? And It's been on the field for 6-7 weeks, and now they're naming names. And Dontari Poe, Darryl Worley, we're going to release them if we can't get them traded. Listen, they're released by the end of the day. They've been horrendous. And there's a couple other guys in that conversation that probably should also be fire sailed and, given for 10 cents on the dollar.
Right.
Because you have to start naming names. This team and the defense is playing in one of the worst collective fashions in the NFL. Yep. We can't just keep, putting the same roster out there. Yep. Let's start making changes, find out who the problems are, figure out what we have with some of the young players, like you had mentioned Neville Gallimore and things like that. Let's start turning the page. They're 2-5 team right now. I don't think they're, envisioning being a competitive team for the rest of 2020. Let's figure out what we have moving forward and let's start trimming the fat. And it sounds like that started.
That's no question. I think coming into the year, and you and I talked about this too, the hiring of Mike Nolan, what was the identity going to be? Were they going to be man coverage, zone coverage, 4-3, 3-4? He's done a little bit of everything throughout the course of his career as a head coach and as a defensive coordinator, most recently a linebacker coach down in New Orleans. And, the way that it seems like they're trending is 3-man front and base. They're going to put their outside guys, DeMarcus Lawrence and, the designated pass rusher, whether that's Aldon Smith or Dorrance Armstrong, they're going to stand him up off the other side. All right, now let's see, what those guys can do out of, in the base. And then when they go nickel, they're playing a nickel, more than 2/3 of the time. They play a lot of dime as well. but they haven't been able to play man coverage really at that high of a rate right now in terms of quality. They're playing a lot of zone, a lot of cover 3, a lot of cover 4. They'll play man on third down, which most teams do, but most often they're playing a lot of zone, and it's mixed results so far, I think, to be kind, with what this team has been able to do. So they're trying to find answers. And that's why, to me, that's why for us, when we're trying to put the segments together for Eagles game plan, it's like, all right, like, we're not going to say how bad this team is in numerous areas. Let's try and find their game planning this week to try and stop Carson Wentz, to try and stop Travis Fulgham, to stop whoever's running the football, whether it's a healthy Miles Sanders or if it's Boston Scott. They're going to try and come into this game to try and game plan. Let's see what they're going to try and do. And that's why we kind of thought, all right, what could they do to try and stop Carson Wentz from breaking the pocket? And that's why we ultimately went with that direction in terms of the segment there for Eagles game plan. Let's now get into some of the areas that we wished we had kind of gotten in. And I think the one guy that I don't think we even mentioned him in the show. We've talked about him already here. We didn't talk about Ezekiel Elliott this week in Eagles game plan. And I think it's more, that decision was made more in terms of the usage. And you mentioned it, with Mike McCarthy, that to me, like that's almost like shocking that we come into this game. We didn't really mention Zeke at all in that show. And it's not necessarily with what he's done. It's more in terms of how they're just not using him to that impactful level that we're used to seeing.
I put out the metric on their run percentage, I think around week 3 or week 4, because they were last in the NFL. And all the don't run on 1st and 10 analytics community came out saying, good. If that's the case, get rid of Zeke Elliott like this week or next week. Like, find a trade partner, get draft picks. There's no reason to pay him what you're paying him for this type of offensive approach. And I know we don't believe in the completely abandon the run type of approach.
Yep, right. Yep.
I believe in balance, and that's what I love out of Sean McVay and Doug Pederson and Kyle Shanahan and Matt LaFleur. And I love the teams that, can win in multiple ways and attack you through beating you up in the run game, and then working play action and shot plays and moving the pocket. And but they have injuries, but they had some interesting players to still talk about. I'm not sitting here trying to do a Ben DiNucci breakdown or show you what Terrence Steele does right and wrong. But, they still have CeeDee Lamb and Tony Pollard and Michael Gallup. So there are a couple of guys I thought that are fixtures of this offense, pillars of the offense moving forward that I thought were worthy of talking about that, just didn't fit into the show. But a lot of conversation around these two teams. But the Cowboys still have some fun young players, particularly on offense.
No question. So with that in mind, is there a one-on-one matchup that you're most excited to watch in this game?
I looked up and down these rosters, Fran. They're depleted. I mean, there's a lot of injuries and moving parts that we talked about. Normally, Fletcher Cox versus Zach Martin is a pretty premier type of pay-per-view matchup. If it's Connor McGovern in there, I'm still watching that because I'm expecting Fletch to just tear through him like a turnstile. And this is a game, if it's Connor McGovern at right guard there over Fletcher Cox most of the afternoon, I need Fletcher Cox to have a big week to be dominant and disruptive on a down-to-down basis. And I know he's starting to get his stride back, start a little slow this year. I think the collective defensive front of the Eagles is playing really good over the last couple of weeks with Malik Jackson and Derek Barnett and BG. I think they're all really hitting their stride as we're approaching midseason.
And I think that, to me, like, I wanted to stay in that same area. I went with Brandon Graham going up against whoever the right tackle is, whether that's Terrence Steele or if they do in fact move Zach Martin over to right tackle. I think when you look at BG, you look at Fletcher Cox, you look at even like Derek Barnett, Josh Sweat, those guys are all playing well. Javon Hargrave, Malik Jackson when he's been out there, all these guys have really done a lot of really good things. So I'm excited to see them against this group. That being said, I'm not going into this matchup necessarily, Ben, and thinking, oh man, like the D-line is going to get 7 sacks in this game, right? Because of the way that Dallas plays, the ball comes out fast. So it's about impacting the quarterback. I don't know that it's going to result in a bunch of sacks. I think, what did Washington have, like 2 or 3 the other day? Now, they were impactful. They were on third down. There was a sack fumble. There was a safety, right? I mean, there were things that turned into big plays for the Washington football team. That's the thing, is like, when you do get those rushes, try to make them count. All right. So the big thing now I want to get into is one of my favorite parts of this episode every single week is your favorite stat of the week. Is there a number or two that you feel is really important, really pivotal in this matchup?
Well, in this game, we talked about Dallas's run commitment. Both these teams obviously struggling to generate turnovers and protect the ball on the offensive side of the ball. Dallas getting the ball out of the quarterback's hand, leading the NFL, I think, in producing yak, but also leading the NFL on 11 personnel. That's 3 receiver sets, another common trend of Mike McCarthy, not really relying on the multiple tight ends like we see in Philadelphia or multiple backs like we see in San Francisco. 11 personnel, pretty through and through. Their run defense numbers are just eye-popping. We already mentioned the yards before contact, after contact, 10-plus runs, those explosive runs, 10-plus yard runs, most in the league as well. So getting gashed too much. But the Eagles' defense, I think, is playing much better than I thought on tape and seeing some of the metrics. They're third in the NFL in quarterback hits and the pressure rate, which is the ability to generate pressure based on how many snaps you've played. They're getting the fourth most pressures.
Yep.
And I really think that's upticked in the past couple of weeks with Malik Jackson and Cox and Derek Barnett playing some good ball. Seems like Josh Sweat, every time he steps on the field, is making impact plays. But at the end of the day, turnover differential, the Eagles are 28th at -5, and the Cowboys are 32nd at -13. And I think that's going to be, the story of the game. Who can get their hands on a turnover and really put their offense in a good position?
That -13 is wild. And I think they've had one pick, and it came in week 1, right, against the Rams. So I think this is obviously a Dallas team that has really struggled to kind of create those turnovers. That stat is wild. Thinking about the 11 personnel, I was thinking about this week, actually. You get the return of Avonte Maddox this week, I think, is what we're expecting, right? I think when you look at Avonte Maddox, that allows Nickel Roby-Coleman to play more in the slot and nickel. I would expect, obviously, less base defense, right? So TJ Edwards potentially back in the lineup. How much is he going to be playing? How much are we going to be seeing big nickel or big dime? How many reps will we see of Will Parks? How many reps will we see of a TJ Edwards and those guys? Duke Riley, obviously more healthy now. So, as Alex Singleton has continued to earn more reps, I'm just interested to see how they will deploy all these guys against that heavy 11 personnel set, as you mentioned, leading the league in 11 personnel. All right, let's now have you empty the book here, Ben. Any other thoughts from around the league? A couple nuggets that have come from film study and looking at the stats from around the NFL.
So it's one of my favorite segments, just kind of bouncing around some of the news and notes I've collected over the week. It's a big play business here, Fran. You got to create big plays. You got to prevent big plays. And I love looking at defensively who is allowing the most and who is preventing them. The Ravens, the best in the league in preventing those 20-plus yard plays, but the worst in the league, surprising teams, Atlanta Falcons, Cincinnati Bengals. Atlanta Falcons took a corner in the first round, obviously needed to address the back end of that secondary. And the Bengals, I think a lot of people are kind of paying a little attention to their offense as Joe Burrow is getting a little more comfortable, but their defense is really, really struggling right now. And you know who leads the NFL right now in slot receptions, sir, Fran? What slot receiver is leading the NFL?
If I had to guess, I mean,
I can throw some names out for you.
Like Tyler Boyd. I'm trying to think. Slot receptions.
Cooper Kupp, CeeDee Lamb. Those type of guys.
Cole Beasley.
Well, you went right for it. You got Tyler Boyd of the Cincinnati
there we go.
Bengals
Nice.
now. And him and Joe Burrow have a really good connection right there. And how about the New England Patriots? They're one of the teams that love to stay small defensively. They love dime. They love dollar defensively, right. 6 and 7 defensive backs. Well, they played the 49ers this week, and they tried to stay small, just like the Packers tried to stay small last year, and they got ran right through for 197 yards and 4 touchdowns on the ground, really putting teams in a conflict with their personnel anytime they bring out Kyle Juszczyk and George Kittle. Aaron Rodgers, 0 turnover-worthy plays in 5 of 6 games this year, playing very, very efficient, safe ball, never putting the defense in bad spots. And looking at pressures from sophomores, Fran, we pay attention to so much of the rookies, but sometimes those guys need a year to get, the speed of the game down and the timing down. So I like to look at what sophomores are leading the NFL in QB pressures. Brian Burns is number 2. Montez Sweat of the Washington football team, number 1. A guy that maybe didn't hit his stride as a rookie, but now with Chase Young on the other side, those Alabama guys on the inside, really fun defensive front down there in Washington.
Interesting. Yeah, I would not have guessed Montez Sweat. I saw he made a number of plays in this game against.
And Dallas. Brian Burns is really hitting his stride really as well good. For the Panthers. Yep,
no question. All right, man. Well, this was fun. We're going to you talk about these young players around the NFL, talking about the pass rushers. We're going to stick with our scouting report this week, talking about a very young player on this Dallas offense. That's CeeDee Lamb. He's our subject this week in Scouting Report.
Dim those lights. We're headed to the film room for the Scouting Report.
All right, Ben, well, let's talk about CeeDee Lamb, coming out of Oklahoma. Obviously, a top 15 pick, top 17 pick with the Sooners this past year by the Dallas Cowboys, one of the top 3 receivers drafted in this spring's NFL draft. Interested to kind of get your thoughts on CeeDee Lamb. We talked about him every single week on the Journey to the Draft podcast, it felt like. So I'm interested to kind of make this transition now, not just to what we saw at Oklahoma, but now what we're seeing with him in Dallas.
Yeah, he's really used in Dallas in a kind of a similar fashion as Oklahoma. A lot worked over in the middle of the field, playing the slot and number 3 in trips, a lot of yards after catch opportunities. But coming from Oklahoma, kind of interesting career because he played with Baker Mayfield, who won the Heisman, then Kyler Murray, who won the Heisman, and then Jalen Hurts came over from Alabama, another Heisman contender. So 3 different quarterbacks, all in the NFL. Interesting frame. He's tall, kind of a wiry, thin lower half guy. These guys in that 6'1", 198 package are typically the 4'3" and 4'4" style of players.
Yep.
CeeDee Lamb wasn't a straight line burner type of guy. He was more of the creative ball in his hands type of guy, a guy that knows how to separate, really competitive at the catch point, really that returner ability with the ball in his hands. Instant speed, good start-stop ability. He's fast, he's quick-footed, but he's not like a burner over the top or just in a linear fashion outrunning guys. Really impressed with his ball skills. Elite ability to attack the ball, track the ball over the shoulder, good adjustments on back shoulders and inaccurate passes. He's quick in and out of his breaks, can snap his head to sell double moves. Really love his manipulation in the routes. The speed manipulation, the stride manipulation, toying with his pacing and head fakes. The play strength was surprisingly good considering his frame. I thought he really, got himself off for press coverage and separated when corners were, on his back at the break point. Dynamic release package. And like I wrote down, just that returner ability, he can escape the phone booth. And you saw that plenty of times, put on the Texas tape last year where he had 6 defenders around him. Really impressive. Some of the cons, minimal press coverage out there in the Big 12. Yep. You just don't see it. A lot of quarters, a lot of off coverage, that thin, skinny frame. Just want to know if he's going to add any bulk or definition to that. Questionable top end speed, like we had talked about, and whether you would have the play strength to handle NFL corners. We talked about the play strength a little bit just within the route in the Big 12, but to be able to get off press coverage. It reminded me a lot of Chad Johnson, that thin frame guy that wasn't a straight over the top vertical threat, but a guy that got himself open in and out of breaks and caught everything. And I know this is a bad time to talk about hands because I think CeeDee Lamb had 3 drops last week.
Yeah, he had a rough game this past week against Washington. Yep.
But traditionally a pretty reliable pass catcher.
Yeah, that was one of the things that stood out to me coming out of Oklahoma. His hands were outstanding. His ball tracking down the field was outstanding. Yards after catch for sure. He's one of the best yak weapons in all of college football last year. That so far has definitely translated. And his competitiveness, and I think that goes hand in hand with the yak, but he was also a really competitive blocker as well. I was interested to see the transition with him going to the slot because almost all of his reps came to the far left of the formation. He would move into the slot at times, but he was a kind of a stationary route runner, right? Everything, it was a somewhat limited route tree. It wasn't a full route tree with Oklahoma. I was really interested to see what he would look like moving into the slot full time. And he's adjusted very well. And I think he has taken a good step as a route runner as well. And I think you credit the other guys that are in that room. You credit CD, you credit receivers coach. He's definitely taken steps as a route runner. He's looked better there than what I saw from a consistency basis with the Sooners. I think that was really interesting. I was most interested, though, you talk about the yak. You mentioned he was not a burner, right? He ran 4.5 flat in the 40-yard dash of the combine. From a laser standpoint, he was 4.42 on the stopwatch. I didn't see a burner. He was 190 pounds, 195 pounds. He wasn't a big, strong, powerful athlete. He wasn't that guy that was going to, like Deebo Samuel, where he's rocked up and he's going to run through contact time and time again. You didn't necessarily see that. So was that yak going to show up? I don't know, man. I guess it's just like that might be a trait that, like, guys just have it or they don't, right? Like, they have that ability, just that feel for being able to make that first man miss, and then that want to be able to pick up every single inch you can after the catch. He certainly has that ability, and I guess the return background definitely shows up there as well.
Yeah, he really reminds me of the same player that he was at Oklahoma being used for the Dallas Cowboys, and I think positional fit and usage at the next level with these receivers is really important. And if he's not that burner, that 4-4 guy that can climb vertically on corners on the outside, let's not ask him to do it. And that's something that Michael Gallup does really well, especially in those isolation situations in Dallas.
Yep.
So that means you put defenses in really tough binds where you have a physical one-on-one receiver in Gallup. And then on the backside, you have Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, guys that really specialize in getting themselves open in the quick game and intermediate areas of the field. So I love the balance and kind of complementative nature of the receivers between Gallup, Amari Cooper, and the young CeeDee Lamb there. It's going to be a team that's, like we talked about, heavy 11 personnel. Those three are on the field quite often. And I just love the kind of mix of skill sets, but you have to use them properly. And I really like the way Mike McCarthy has implemented CeeDee Lamb into the lineup.
How do you view him in this matchup going against the Eagles? I mean, we've seen Nickel Roby-Coleman mostly in the slot, obviously some Cravon LeBlanc as well, more so when Avonte Maddox has been hurt. I guess it'll be Lamb versus Nickel Roby-Coleman for a majority of this matchup. Roby-Coleman's had issues as a tackler. He's definitely missed some tackles here in inopportune times, third down, red zone. That will be something that cannot happen against CeeDee Lamb because of what he can do with the ball in his hands.
Well, I think the Eagles defense too, their front seven's been playing better. The defensive front, I think, has the advantage against this kind of injury depleted Cowboys offensive line. So I think they need to find ways to manufacture quick gains outside of the run game and outside of the quick passing game up the field. So I want to see more perimeter action from the Cowboys. Get the ball in CeeDee Lamb's hands on maybe some bubble screens, things like that. Those different types of yards after catch opportunities, not just the quick game routes, the 3 steps, the stuff underneath, but maybe trying to play the numbers game in the box, getting him some advantageous blockers on the perimeter, or maybe trying to put Eagles linebackers in a bind with some RPO style of concepts into the offense and really trying to make the linebackers wrong and have a slant coming in behind zone actions of the run game. So you got to find just easy ways to manufacture this offense. And I think that starts and ends with a CeeDee Lamb, whether it's end arounds, jet motions, whatever you have to do. I think what happened the first 7 weeks of the Cowboys, rip the page. Let's come up with a good game plan for this week moving forward.
That's a good point. Well, Ben, this was great, man. Excited to talk a little bit of college football with you later this week on the Journey to the Draft podcast. You guys can find that podcast wherever you get your podcast. Ben, we'll talk to you soon, man.
Raise a glass to that comforting feeling of an Eagles touchdown with the all-new Broad & Pattison wine collection created in partnership with Wink, featuring a Cabernet, a Rosé, and a Chardonnay. Broad & Pattison wines are the perfect pairing for any occasion. Now you can bring the sweet taste of victory with you to a dinner with friends or to the tailgate with your game day crew. Purchase online today at PhiladelphiaEagles.com/wine to stock up and have Broad & Pattison delivered right to your door. A portion of proceeds from every bottle benefit Eagles Autism Foundation.
Before we keep going with this episode, it's really important to me that I talk about voting. Now, no matter when you're listening to this, we are under a week away from Election Day on November 3rd. And I've talked about mail-in voting in the past and everything you need to know to get that done safely and efficiently. Now let's talk about in-person voting next week. Now, the first thing is that more so than any other year, you need to confirm your polling place, and you can do that by just visiting gettothepolls.com. If you voted back in the spring during primaries, you may remember that a lot of polling places got consolidated because of COVID-19 precautions. So that will likely be the case in a lot of areas. So just to be sure, make sure you know where your polling place is. And honestly, I know this is the case for me in my district. My polling place got moved in the spring, but it's back to my normal place now. So you just want to make sure that you know where you're going to be going next Tuesday on November 3rd. So make sure you can go, again, you can go do that at gettothepolls.com. You don't know what crowds are going to look like when you get out there. So the second part of this, make sure you give yourself plenty of time. Give yourself a little bit extra time than you think you need than what you normally need on any other election. Next big thing, of course, is just a social distance. Wear your mask. Stay 6 feet away from other people whenever possible. Not all states are going to make masks mandatory at polling places, but please, just to be safe, but remember, masks are not just for you, that's for those around you. You're going to be voting around seniors, people with conditions that you and I may not know about, but that they may not know about themselves, but it makes them more susceptible to serious complications from COVID-19. So please, wear your mask, wear it correctly, make sure we're taking care of everybody around us in our neighborhood. Next up, use hand sanitizer before you touch all surfaces. However, do not, and this might seem silly to some people, but do not use hand sanitizer on the voting machines themselves, because if you do that, you could really cause the machine to malfunction. Just count on your pole place workers to keep those bad boys clean. They will do their part. You just make sure that you don't put sanitizer or soap on the machines themselves. If you're really worried about it, obviously you can sanitize beforehand, but you can put on gloves or use like a napkin or a paper towel to kind of cover your finger when you touch the surface of the voting machine. But please do not put anything on the machine itself. That will avoid any complications for that and prevent other people from voting. So please don't do that. Remember, look, everybody just be safe. 100 million people, eligible voters, 100 million people did not participate in the general election 4 years ago. Do what you can to help lower that number. It is all of our civic duty to make sure that all of our voices are heard. Get out and vote on November 3rd. Great stuff there from Ben, who you can follow on Twitter, just like I do, at @BenFennell_NFL. And while you're at it, I'm at EaglesXOs. That's where I post all the podcasts I'm a part of and all of our X's Nose content that we produce at Eagles Entertainment. And I greatly appreciate everybody that promotes this podcast on all forms of social media. That is one way to support the show. But the best way is going to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. Leave us a rating or leave us a comment. If you leave it a question, we will answer it here on the show. And I wanted to give a shout out to someone who did just that. Write him, left a 5-star review saying, Fran, I was wondering, with Will Parks back in the lineup, do you think that we will see Jalen Mills get more reps at corner in some sets to help add some height and length to that spot? And maybe we see Kayvon Wallace play more as the third safety. So, Will, I think that'll be interesting. Obviously, with Kayvon being currently injured, we'll see when he gets back in the lineup how they try and mix him in. He played on base downs only, just so when the Eagles were in their base defense. That was the package they gave him when Will Parks was hurt and when Maddox was hurt and Mills made the move over to corner. So we'll see. I mean, if they feel that he can take it and they want to get their best 11 on the field and try and incorporate him more, they might. But if not, it wouldn't shock me if they said, look, embrace special teams, embrace that role. We'll bring you along slowly on defense. Remember, Jim Schwartz said earlier this year, and I think that's a stop point, is that when you're looking at up the positions up the middle, linebacker, safety, and you look on the offensive side, center, quarterback, you need those guys it takes a little bit of time to get fully up to speed where they are playing consistent winning football. So, for them to be taking their time with guys like Kayvon Wallace, Davion Taylor, not all that surprising to me on my end. So I think if you really want to get Kayvon on the field, that would be the pathway. I would say, okay, we'll play Jalen Moore at corner and we'll allow Will Parks to be the true strong safety, and we'll bring Kayvon in dime situations and big nickel situations. But my guess, my feeling on it is they probably will stick with what the plan was from the jump, and that's for Jalen Mills to be the starting strong safety with Will Parks coming in those special sub packages and Avonte Maddox staying outside at the cornerback spot. So that would be how my gut says that they would go the rest of the way. But we will see. We'll see how it plays out. And that's why it's important, though, for these guys to all be versatile, because that gives them some flexibility here moving forward. Thanks so much to Wilt. Great question. And ironically enough, I'm glad you asked about Will Parks, because he is the player that I caught up with this week. We'll talk about it right here now in our interview one-on-one with safety Will Parks. Excited to welcome in Eagles safety Will Parks. Will, thanks for joining us, man.
Yes, sir, man. How you doing?
Doing all right. So, look, a lot of Eagles fans are fully aware. You grew up in Philadelphia. You make that West Coast trip. You go out to school to Arizona, and then you go to the Denver Broncos. You come home here to Philly. I'm excited to dig into your athletic background. Before we get into football, what were some of the other sports that you played growing up, and what was your favorite sport, I guess, as a little kid?
My first official organized sport was football. After that, I played basketball. I ran track. I played baseball up at the 21st Ward in Roxborough, and then I boxed a little bit. My uncle is George Benton, so I got a little bit of that boxing background. Okay. But I was pretty much all over. It was wherever to keep me out of trouble. That's wherever I was at playing sports. Was there a sport that you feel best helped you make that transition to football, or do you kind of lean on most? To be honest, I love football, it's in my heart, but I'm not even gonna lie, I swear I was going to the NBA at one point in my career. I swear I was going to the NBA. I was like, man, I'm gonna be just like AI, and I kind of made that football transition, kind of 9th, 10th grade in high school. It kind of was like, all right, look, basketball is slim to none. Football is a little bit higher than that. So I'm like, all right, yeah, I'm gonna just stick with football, and it got me here.
How old were you when the Sixers went to the finals? 2001.
What I was 6,
okay,
7, yes. No, I was I was 5'6", yeah.
All right, so you were too young to like set up and set up. Were you awake for like?
I knew they played the Detroit Pistons
okay,
back then.
Okay,
Yeah.
I remember like vividly, being up, staying up for him doing the step over Tyrone Lue and everything, like all of that. I grew up in Philly, like not too far from where you grew up. So,
yes, sir.
All that stuff, very, very reminiscent. I want to dig in now to your background playing football, because I know when you played at Germantown, you were a receiver and a corner, right?
Yes,
so
sir.
Did you always play the skill positions, even growing up through Pop Warner?
Yo, to believe it or not, my first official position in football was Jason Kelsey. I was snapping the ball. I was a center, you know what I mean? And I was always aggressive. And then I transitioned to right guard when I went to the 75-pound, because I played for the Wissahickon Braves, Little League team. I played right guard. And then I remember that same year I was competing for a guy to play running back. They was like, hey, man, you fast. Run against this other fast guy with the ball in two hands and run down the field. The guy just took off, and it beat me for the spot. But other than that, man, I kind of transitioned like quarterback. Then I played running back. Then I played corner, a little bit of linebacker. So I was really all over.
So Wissahickon Braves, is that the home field? It's right by D'Alessandro's?
Yes, sir.
Right
by D'Alessandro's across from Chubby's. Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes,
Just
sir.
want to make sure that we're on the same page. All right. So were you excited about like making the switch out of skill position, or were you mad that you got moved from the offensive line?
I'm not even gonna lie, because when I was on the 75-pound football team, I played D tackle, and we played the Ben Salem Ramblers, and I had like 8 TFLs. I was just doing this nice old swim move the whole time. You know, kids don't know what a swim move is back then. I just seen it on Madden and just started taking off with it.
All right, so take us now. You get to high school, and you're playing more wide receiver and corner. Then you go to Arizona. When did you make that transition to the safety spot? And I want to really dig into what that transition was like for you.
I'm going to be so detailed with this one. So my first 2 weeks of training camp, I was at corner. I moved inside to nickel. Yep. Then I guess, some way, somehow, they must have seen my aggressiveness and I could still cover inside. So it was like, hey, man, he's fast. He's whatever. He could do it all. Put him back high. I go back high to safety, and I'm messing up almost every play they called for me. I was just blitzing, and when it was a coverage, I was playing coverage when I was supposed to blitz. You know what I mean? So I kind of just had to relax a little bit, understand, as a safety, you have to see everything. You know what I mean? Not just that corner vision on one side of the field. You have to be a quarterback back there. So after that, it kind of just was super easy once because my coaching staff in Arizona was pretty legit. I'm not even going to lie. They're pretty legit. So they kept me up to par, and it got me here in the league.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of fans might look at a lot of corners and say, "Oh, well, if he doesn't play well enough at corner, just move him to safety."
Oh, no.
There's so much that goes into that, right?
Yeah, they have no complete idea, because at the end of the day, we have to tackle.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So, if you're not ready to tackle, don't even think about coming back here.
Yeah, and then you're seeing the field. Like, how difficult was it to see the field from 20 yards deep, 18 yards deep, as opposed to playing out on the boundary?
Man, at first, when I first moved to safety in college, I would only visualize, my side of the field. I seen my corner and I seen the backer in front of me and the D tackle, so I kind of understood that part. But then he's like, no, you have to factor in the other side too, because that might change your responsibility. I looked at him like, what? And after that, I kind of just, made that transition, and it became smooth. And they put a lot of emphasis on studying tape, and that's kind of one of my fortes is studying tape and understanding what offensive schemes are trying to do, especially as a safety. When you get a beat like that, it makes your job a lot easier. You're a little bit closer to the ball instead of being 18 yards. You're now at 6 to 8 yards trying to make a tackle or play on the ball. So that's pretty good.
Who was a player when you first got to Denver, you first came into the NFL, that really kind of took you under the wing? Really? Okay.
TJ Ward.
What did TJ do?
The first time I got drafted there, he said, what's up to me. The May 6th was the official day I moved out to Denver from Philly after the draft. And he texted me on Twitter like, hey, man, come to my crib at 8 o'clock. I'm thinking like, hey, we're going to do something fun and stuff. Nah. Clean the crib, then we're going to do something fun. I had to clean his house. And then, we went outside and stuff like that and had our fun. But it was kind of him, TJ Ward, Chris Harris, Aqib Talib, and Darian Stewart. Those kind of the main, Von Miller, DeMarcus Ware. Those 6 guys I kind of had as a young pup playing defense over there in Denver. That kind of put me under their wing and gave me the keys to the ropes.
And then lastly, one of the big things that was talked about when you came back to Philly was your versatility. So all the different things that you do at the safety spot, what's your favorite thing? Like, what's the thing that gives you the most juice when the play is called?
To be honest, like I mean, a lot of people know I love hitting and making tackles, but and making plays on the ball. But one of my secret weapons, I would want to say, I'm gonna turn this to a different question. One of my secret weapons is putting a 300-pounder on their butt.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm kind of I get infatuated by it. I get a thrive. I get a little feel of when I put a lineman on their butt.
Well, see, so like that goes back to you playing center. Like you're just trying to move people.
Yeah. I just want to cause I mean I know if I hit a lineman, now they know this little 200-pound guy isn't to be played with. Right. So now I kind of get it with I get away with a little bit more stuff, and I'm able to make more plays in the football. When you're hitting those guys, as a linebacker and stuff like that. So I'm 200 pounds. So if you catch me in the box, it's over for me. So I gotta hit you first.
Did you have a secret weapon as a boxer as a kid? Like, did you draw on that?
Yeah, I mean, my feet.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, my feet, my feet, and my uncle kind of was George Benton. He was a Philly shell guy, you know what I mean? So without the shoulder, with your shoulder, you need your feet, to move and duck punches, stuff like that. So I kind of use that to my advantage as well.
Well, Will, this was awesome, man. Really appreciate you joining us here on our one-on-one. Stay safe. We'll talk to you soon, man.
Yes, sir, man. Appreciate you.
Don't miss your chance to be in the stands at Lincoln Financial Field this season with an Eagles fan cutout. Put on your game day best and upload a photo of yourself so that you can still join us on game days. Fan cutouts printed by Rico are only $100, with net proceeds benefiting Eagles Autism Foundation. Your purchase will also waive the registration fee for the 2021 Eagles Autism Challenge event. Order yours at PhiladelphiaEagles.com/cutouts.
Thanks so much to Will Parks and all of you out there for your continued support of this show and all the rest of our podcasts on Eagles Entertainment. All that being said, I think that'll do it. Another show in the books here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. For everybody here at the NovaCare Complex, I am Fran Duffy. We will talk to you next week.